Arkane was a dream of mine when I was, maybe 20 something, that eventually I got to start, and it went way further than I could even imagine. And it was really a fan's journey for me. I was a fan of Underworld, of Ultima, of Richard Garriott, of Deus Ex, Harvey here. So all I wanted was to be part of that, of these people that were doing those great games and have my way to contribute. And
Arkane is different from other studios for a number of reasons. They have offices in Lyon and Austin, two cultures that have as much in common as blue cheese and blue jeans. They make complex games that require the player's attention, games that are difficult to make and even harder to market, games that no other AAA studio seems to want to make.
You see, Arkane Studios was founded in 1999 by Frenchman Raphael Colantonio, a fan of Origin Systems and Looking Glass Studios, who wanted to make his own immersive sims. He set up shop with a handful of friends in his native Lyon, a hotbed of young development talent, as it contained the headquarters of the once powerful Infogrames. Today we know them as the creators of the wildly popular Dishonored franchise and 2017's System Shock homage Prey. But these games are the triumphant third act to a frenetic 20-year history. So to tell the story of how Arkane got to where it is today, we're going to have to go a lot deeper. For this documentary, we travelled to Lyon, France and Austin, Texas to spend time with both teams, and we caught up with its founder remotely over video chat. Our mission? To figure out what it is about Arkane that makes them so unique, how they went from developing first-person fantasy games to some of the most complex and polished AAA games of recent memory, and to shine a light on the darkest era of the studio, one in which they created some of their most interesting projects, none of which saw the light of day.
This one is international, folks, so unless you speak French and English, you're going to want to put subtitles on. Hit the gear button below to put on the closed captions that work best for you. Okay? You ready? Alright. Our story begins with a game that many of you have never played, and probably quite a lot of you actually have never even heard of.
I have to see it through the eyes of my own self, 20 years ago. I was way more naive. I was determined to make this game, right? Arx Fatalis. And then if that worked, I was going to make more of these. But that was the only thing that mattered to me. I didn't care about if we were going to make money or anything. So back then, what happened was that I was working for a small company that was providing some work for Infogrames. I gathered 4 other people that were excited to actually join that adventure. I think the reason why they joined me is that they were as naive as I was, as beginners as I was. No person with experience would have joined this project, obviously. So it was a bunch of naive, smart, of course. We were smart, but still naive. Like we want to do this cool RPG like they do in the US, and we are only 4 people. Forget about that detail. It's going to be amazing, and we're going to do all these things. It's going to be like Ultima, etc. And then as we're doing it, it's like, oh my God, like it's just never going to work.
Arx Fatalis was an impressive game considering the size of team that created it. An homage to Ultima Underworld, it too was set entirely in an underground dungeon, the game's title being Latin for Fatal Fortress. Like Underworld, it was a non-linear simulation that reveled in emergent gameplay. It was influential on its own too. Those of you who watched our documentary on The Witness may remember its gesture system that had the player draw shapes to cast spells. Thanks to the success of Arkane in more recent years, Arx Fatalis has become somewhat of a cult classic, but the truth is it was a commercial failure for the studio, a game few people bought and nobody wanted a sequel to.
Yeah, Dark Messiah was meant to be the sequel to Arx Fatalis initially. We had shipped the Arx Fatalis, we were very proud of it. Funnily enough, it still sells today, but back then it did not do well commercially. You're not going to make a sequel of something that did not make money. I mean, we would have, but no publishers that were looking to talking to was actually interested in Arx. But they liked the team and they wanted to use our talents to fit one of their existing franchises. So yeah, that was the last thing we wanted to do. It was feeling like, you know, we started Arkane. We were like those warriors of, we only gonna do what we want. Great games for gamers, for us. We don't care about the money. I mean, of course, we need the money so that we can make the next one, but it's not like we're not gonna chase what makes money, right? It's more about what is artistically interesting to us.
Part of me wanting to even work in games was seeing in this edition of Dark Messiah, there is a really nice making of where you can see, you know, Raph, Etienne, and all those people talking about what it takes to make a game like this.
So the reason why we used the Source engine was kind of an accident. Back a few years ago when we released Arx Fatalis, we were showing the game at E3 for the Xbox, and Valve came to our booth and just to say hi and to tell us that they liked the game. A little later, we were starting our own engine for the next game, which was going to become Dark Messiah, as we were doing this engine, we saw at the same time the demos coming out for Half-Life 2, and we were very impressed by that, of course.
Yeah, it was a super small team at the time. I worked remotely from home for a while, and then I actually moved to France. And so I was in Lyon with those guys, and the studio was kind of a pirate ship back in those days. You know, we had a guy named Laurent who was walking around in olive drab that didn't quite meet his shoes, and he looked like a French revolutionary. I did level design. I worked on the mansion. I worked on the crypts, the necropolis. There was a lot of dead things back then.
La team était de 8 personnes à peu près. Et ce qui m'a décidé aussi, c'est quand j'ai fait l'entretien, ils avaient une démo de Arx 2, qui n'était pas encore Dark Messiah. Et c'était très viscéral. Et pour moi, c'était vraiment innovant. J'avais jamais vu ça. En first person, j'avais vu Half-Life 1, mais qui m'avait un peu touché. Il y avait eu Deus Ex. Mais ça, là, c'était un peu spécial. C'était vraiment... tu pouvais jouer avec tes poings, tes pieds. Et j'ai vu la démo sur le Source Engine, où tu pouvais faire des charges attaques avec l'épée, tu pouvais mettre des coups de pied, ils avaient des premiers sorts, je crois que c'était une boule de feu que tu pouvais diriger.
One of my most clear memories was I heard this insane laughter begin, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and that was the moment that they realized there was this bug where the orcs would run and they would hit this patch of ice and they would just go flying off the cliffs, and everybody was hooting about it. And of course, that's what we do at Arkane, is it turned into a feature.
So then we find ourselves having to, because we were like a few weeks away from going under, we find ourselves of having to accept to put our game into someone else's dress, right? And modifying it a little bit, making it more accessible, etc. That was really painful. So we did it because, funnily enough, the alternative was Bethesda. Todd Vaughn, I love Todd Vaughn, who saw the game like 2 weeks before Ubisoft signed it. He said, give me 2 weeks, and then he called me, or he sent me an email, kind of like a day after I had signed with Ubisoft. I could not wait anymore. I would have loved back then to do it with Bethesda, but eventually went with Ubisoft back then.
Would that have been an Arx Fatalis 2 then, or would it have been a Elder Scrolls?
Yeah, no, it would have been it would have been Arx Fatalis 2.
Stop right there, or it gets ugly.
Dark Messiah just hit the spot for me as something where I was in a world that was kind of my jam, something a little more fantastical, but it was first person, and I could throw people into stuff. I could throw people into spikes, I could set people on fire, I could throw people off buildings, and no game had ever allowed me to do that before. It was always just shooting people. Shooting people is fun, but not as fun as like feeling like you're having a physical effect on what's happening to your enemy.
There, or it gets
best kick in a video game, maybe?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yes.
The design tenets were, back in the day, we were like, let's do what Looking Glass Studios does. Let's follow that. We really just tried to say yes to the player, make sure that there were many ways to approach any given, obstacle or, lots of different solutions.
Yeah, I remember Dark Messiah was such an odd game because the story felt so disconnected from the action. I would have happily taken the game without the story. And it's funny to me that my love affair with Arkane started off with gameplay, not with story.
Right.
Because Dark Messiah's story, I mean, replay it. It's a weird game, but the physicality of it felt great. And there was something really playful about it that I loved. There was something about the fact that I could go into a combat encounter and it didn't matter if I was good at headshots or not. What mattered was, could I use my environment to my advantage? And so it felt a little more creative and cerebral and playful and fun. And it makes you feel smart. I felt so smart when I kicked people into spikes because I decided, there's spikes, there's an enemy, I can fix this.
We were very late in production and we kind of wanted more interactivity with the environment. So I remember the lead level designer at the time named Christoph, who was a really great guy. He just came out of the room and said, "Put spikes everywhere."
After the release of Dark Messiah, Raphael would leave Lyon to set up a sister studio in the home of immersive sims, Austin, Texas. It was here that Richard Garriott's origin was based. It was here that Ironstorm had developed Deus Ex. With that in mind, he went about setting up his dream team. He brought Anthony Husso back from Lyon, hired steady hands like Ricardo Baer and Stephen Hurd, and finally got together with an old acquaintance, Harvey Smith.
Okay, let's go broad. When did you join the studio? Where did you work before?
Yeah, I got into games in 1993. I started at Origin, known for the Ultima and Wing Commander games, but I went there because they had an association with Looking Glass. They had published Underworld, which was my favorite game of all time. I got to work with them on System Shock, the follow-up to that, and it was like career-defining for me. It was exactly what I'm in love with. I was at Ironstorm on Deus Ex 1 and 2 for 6 years. So I came to Arkane in 2008, I think. So yeah, I've been here 12 years now.
Around this same time, Half-Life 2's art director Viktor Antonov was moving from Seattle back to Paris, at which point he started a long and fruitful relationship collaborating with Arkane in Lyon. In any other documentary about Arkane, this is where we'd talk about the development of Dishonored, how the teams in Lyon and Austin collaborated across continents to create their breakthrough hit. Because up until now, that's been the story.
You see, the challenge of telling a story about Arkane is that there's a significant blind spot in the studio's history, a period of time where the company struggled to release anything, taking work-for-hire projects, helping on other studios' games, attempting to fund passion projects, and dipping their toes in some really fascinating collaborations.
Up until now, it's been impossible to chart the creative growth of this studio, how they went from making games like Arx and Dark Messiah to the critical and commercial success of Dishonored. But thanks to a whole host of people, we are finally able to connect the Arkane of old with the Arkane of today, to shine a light on 3 previously unseen games that stood as critical chapters in the development of this studio. An innovative multiplayer shooter, a collaboration with Stevenen Spielberg, and an unreleased chapter in one of gaming's most popular franchises.
Alright folks, strap in. This one's going some places.
The single-player experience takes you through 8 hours of intense action FPS, and that happens within a compelling world designed and directed by Viktor Antonov, art director of Half-Life 2.
Yeah, I mean, those 3 projects come with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of pain, all of them for different reasons. LMNO marked the end of Crossing, actually. I still don't know if I can mention the publisher. I so want to, but I don't want. But we're about to sign this deal. It's a very, very terrible deal with the publisher for The Crossing. And they cornered us. They were the worst in negotiation, or the best, I don't know. They had this really cutthroat technique where they would allow you to talk to them only every week or 2 weeks. Every time it was like in increments of 1 or 2 weeks. And every time we had something to tell them about something, they would come back with a new version of the contract that was worse than the previous one. When you have your fingers stuck in the door for so long, it's extremely painful. And so we lost about $1 million of our own dollars in this adventure with the crossing. By sustaining the people, we did not fire, we did not lay off anyone, we kept going, thinking we're going to sign this deal. And that's how much we wanted to make that game. We had a really cool demo, the game was really fun.
The unique, incredible feature of the game is something we call crossplayer, fusing single player with multiplayer. You can check the crossplayer option at any time during your story to allow other players of a skill level comparable to yours to join your game and take possession of your enemies. This feature adds a new dimension of fun that's never been seen before in any game.
Oui, mais le principe du jeu, c'était un gameplay asymétrique, donc un joueur, et en face, je crois qu'il y en avait 3 ou 4 qui pouvaient envahir la partie.
Donc tu pouvais jouer l'histoire, et de temps en temps, en fait, tu te faisais envahir sur certains niveaux par quelqu'un qui jouait à la place des IA. Et le pitch de l'histoire, en gros, c'est que, je vais le faire un petit peu high level, à l'époque des Templiers, le monde s'est splitté en deux, et il y a 2 mondes en fait en parallèle, c'est un multiverse de 2. Donc tu as le monde des Templiers qui a évolué, où les Templiers sont restés en place, et on va jouer à Paris, donc tu as un Paris qui est très allongé, un peu gothique, avec plein de détails, ils vivent pas de la même façon dans la ville, et le Paris normal. Et le Paris normal, c'est un peu, il y a des grèves, il y a des rébellions dans la ville, mais c'est vraiment réaliste. Et il y a des portals qui rejoignent les 2 mondes. Donc les Templars, les Templiers peuvent t'envahir en fait dans le Paris de maintenant, et toi tu peux passer dans le Paris Templier. Donc ça c'est intéressant, il y a un côté un peu SWAT dans le monde réaliste, et il y a un côté Templier où tu as une armure un peu spéciale. T'as des grappins, tu peux voler contre les murs, tu peux jeter des objets, t'as une épée intégrée, des nail guns. Donc c'est super intéressant parce que c'est des gameplays différents, mais ils se marient très bien ensemble, mais ils viennent chacun de leur monde en fait.
Playing as a soldier is a very different experience. Let's have a look at it. The matchmaking server finds a game for you and your friends against an Archon of comparable skill. The Archon is pretty beefed up compared to a soldier, so you have little chance of surviving if you don't team up and coordinate with the other 3 players on your team.
Crossing, c'était d'avoir un gameplay asymétrique. Déjà en termes de gameplay, c'est un challenge, mais en termes de texte, c'était aussi compliqué. Il fallait arriver à bien... on utilisait le Source Engine à l'époque, donc le Source était plutôt prévu, il avait un système assez sympathique pour gérer la partie client et la partie serveur, mais voilà, ça demandait quand même pas mal d'efforts, et puis voilà, pareil, on était une petite équipe, donc il y a beaucoup de choses à faire. Les plus gros challenges, c'était, comme toujours, à Arkane, on essaie de faire la simulation, donc il y avait des choses comme le grappin, des choses comme ça, qui, dans un jeu solo, single, c'est assez simple, parce qu'on peut gérer la physique. Là, il faut penser que voilà, tout le monde a une vue sur le grappin, et donc c'était un peu plus compliqué. Donc on a passé pas mal de temps là-dessus, sur tout ce qui est problème de réplication et cohérence quand il y a plusieurs joueurs, vu que c'était un jeu qui était assez rapide. Si les joueurs sont en train de rusher sur le player, voilà, faut que ça soit qu'il n'y ait pas du recalage en permanence, ce genre de choses. Donc le premier aspect moi, de Crossing qui m'avait plu, c'est quand je suis arrivé sur le projet, c'était la DA. Donc, et Sébastien avait déjà des idées assez arrêtées sur ce qu'il voulait avoir en rendu, donc il y avait des challenges intéressants. Donc, et puis après, l'autre partie qui était assez originale, c'était vraiment ce côté asymétrique où à l'époque on les prenait un peu pour des fous d'essayer de se lancer là-dedans. Donc ça, c'est toujours assez agréable de se dire on est sur quelque chose que les autres n'ont pas fait, on est les premiers à le faire, donc c'est vrai que c'était bien. Et puis surtout, ce qui était sympa, c'est que moi je suis arrivé, le jeu commençait déjà bien à marcher, et quand on faisait des playtests, tout le monde s'éclatait. Donc on voyait que le commençait à être bien réglé. Souvent c'est le problème sur ces jeux-là, c'est d'arriver à trouver un équilibre. Donc ça marchait déjà. Donc nous on faisait que...
Artistiquement, c'était super cool, parce que faire du réalisme, j'avais jamais vraiment fait. Et en même temps, ça m'a permis à ce moment-là, en faisant le monde parallèle, de dire bon bah maintenant on peut se marrer un petit peu. Et là on faisait des immeubles complètement fous, très très hauts, où les riches, comme au Moyen-Âge, vivent en bas. et les pauvres vivent tout en haut. En fait. Donc on a étiré les immeubles, et ce qui nous permet de naviguer, de fermer les maps. Et c'était vraiment intéressant. C'était deux architectures où c'est la même ville, mais on ne vit pas la même façon dedans. Et ça, c'était très cool.
All in all, playing both sides of the cross-player experience is equally fun and challenging.
But unfortunately, we had only one publisher that was that close to sign, and the deal was so horrible that I didn't know what to do. And I've been in this situation so many times. Mm. And then EA showed up with Doug Church, was Harvey and my guru in terms of like those kind of games, right? Came by and hey guys, do you have some capacity right now? We're looking for a co-developer to make that game with Stevenen Spilberg. And I was like, wow, that's not the main thing I want to do right now. But frankly, at this point, those guys tortured us so bad that I would love to say no to them. I would love to say no to them. A few days before the day that we were supposed to sign, it was the shittiest deal ever, but we're going to do it because otherwise we go out of business. And this at least allows us to do some form of the crossing, even though it was not the exact form we wanted. But frankly, it would have been the kiss of death because the budget was way lower than what we needed. And they were horrible.
I remember the day we said no, and your elation at the build up to that, and it was very satisfying to watch. Yeah.
And so that was great, even though I was not personally very part of it. It was because Doug and Randy were directing this game, and so really what I was doing was, lending capacity of my company with all those great designers, great artists, great that we had, great programmers. So it was good for everyone.
Ok, donc le projet LMNO, c'est l'histoire de Spielberg qui veut faire, en gros, qui a un script, qui veut faire un film et un jeu. Il est très orienté jeu, Spielberg. Il avait lancé plusieurs projets, dont Boom Blocks, on a participé à ce projet. Et celui-là, c'était un peu le projet filmique, cinématographique. Donc à EA LA, ils ont monté une team de spécialistes avec des anciens, donc toujours les mêmes qu'on recroise de Valve à Junction Point à partout. Donc il y avait Doug Church, Andy Smith, Habib Zagarpour, très très fort. Et ils ont choisi de faire une collaboration avec des personnes spécialisées en first person combat, du bon level design, un layer de RPG mais plutôt puzzle game, enfin, enquête, etc. Donc ça, Arkane Studio matchait bien, ils ont appelé cette formation Blueprint. Et voilà, ça s'appelait comme ça. Donc on collaborait, ils venaient sur notre site, on allait à Los Angeles, c'est là où j'ai fait les photos, hop, on faisait des voyages comme ça. Et l'histoire, en gros, c'est... je me rappelle plus vraiment du nom du personnage qu'on joue, mais il est chargé de sortir de prison une personne, et il s'avère qu'en fait, c'est une extraterrestre. Elle est capturée dans un labo type FBI, je crois qu'on appelle X-Cap, et donc on s'arrange pour la faire sortir de prison, et on va voyager avec elle, ça va être comme un road trip, un petit peu Spielberg d'ailleurs, de la côte Est à la côte Ouest. Et le niveau que nous on développait plus particulièrement, c'était la station au milieu du jeu.
Alright, before we show you the game, I want to give you a little bit of context because this can so often be lost when talking about unfinished games from the past.
LMNO was a project codename, part of a 3-game collaboration between Spielberg and EA that was announced around 2005. One of those games is 2008's Boom Blocks, originally codenamed PQRS, that was a novel mix of Jenga and Tetris Blast. It reviewed well and sold well when it came to market. Sadly, LMNO never did, and was cancelled much earlier in its development than The Crossing was. So the slice of game that exists at Arkane today is far rougher around the edges than you're probably used to seeing. It was a game based around chaperoning an AI character who was on the run from the law, a short but dense experience with a story that changed based on your relationship with Eve. Many impressive qualities of the game may also be lost to time given how far games have come today. The visuals and expressive animations are really advanced for the time. Games like Assassin's Creed had yet to popularize parkour, and the idea of a first-person game without gunplay, a requirement of Spielberg, was only in its infancy.
Mais ce qui était intéressant en fait, c'est que First Person Combat, donc nos références c'était Jason Bourne, et c'est pas évident en première personne, on avait déjà fait du combat mais avec des weapons, mais tout au point déjà c'est un petit peu différent. Attraper les gens, donc voilà, donc il y avait toute une team qui travaillait sur le combat, l'animation, l'IA, etc. Moi je m'occupais donc de tous les visuels, les décors. Habib à Los Angeles travaillait surtout sur les shaders, la filmographie, enfin la photo du jeu et les personnages. Et l'extraterrestre avec qui on travaille, Eve, elle nous accompagne et on peut interagir avec elle en lui pointant des informations, et on peut avoir dans la bulle qu'on a, c'est 3 types d'Eve, une combat, une je sais plus ce qu'elle fait, et l'autre en fait elle peut nous donner des tuyaux, des informations. Donc elle pointe en fait, elle sent les choses et elle s'exprime avec des auras au-dessus de son visage en fait, chaque couleur, chaque forme va donner des émotions, des sensations, elle peut nous redonner un peu de vie, elle peut nous aider si on se met en mode agilité à grimper à des endroits inaccessibles en vrai. Donc c'est comme si elle nous donnait une sorte de force et on peut aller attraper des barres, etc. Donc il y avait une grande mobilité, un petit peu à la Mirror's Edge, mais enfin différente parce que c'était pas juste des parcours, c'est vraiment l'environnement réel quoi, qui est très photo-cinéma, et nous il fallait qu'on s'arrange pour que ce soit beau, crédible et en même temps fonctionnel. Donc c'est là où Ravenholm, Crossing, tous ces jeux nous ont aidés à savoir faire ce type de choses là. C'est pas juste des prototypes, c'était vraiment concret quoi. Donc on a des prototypes où c'est tout gris hein, comme tous les studios, mais après il fallait que ça fonctionne dans tous les environnements. Donc avec tous les problèmes de collision qu'on peut avoir, etc. Mais c'était super intéressant, il y a beaucoup de vie dans les niveaux, c'était très vivant. C'était pas open world, c'était Unreal Engine, mais c'était Unreal 3 à l'époque. Mais non, c'était vraiment c'était une expérience exceptionnelle quoi.
Hey. Noah?
Et on a fait le road trip avec le directeur artistique, Habib Zagarpour, et Anupam Das, qui était le lead environnement. Et on est parti faire des photos de Los Angeles, toute la, pas la route 66, mais la route qui mène, on a fait les 2 chemins qui mènent à Las Vegas. On a fait la boucle. On s'est arrêté dans tous les tire shops, donc les magasins de pneus, les garagistes, les stations-service, les maisons, les collines, les buissons. On prenait tout en photo comme pour un film. Les Joshua Trees, tout ça. Et voilà, ça c'était vraiment le top quoi. C'est mémorable quoi, comme moment. Ça a duré 1 semaine. On est revenu, on avait des tonnes de photos et du coup on a pu faire toute la station qu'on voit dans la démo que je t'ai montré tout à l'heure. Voilà, et ça c'est top. Et comme je te racontais tout à l'heure en anecdote, on avait avec Manu Petit, Emmanuel, qui est devenu ensuite lead visual sur Prey. Je lui dis, je sais que vendredi il y a Spielberg qui vient à Los Angeles. Si tu veux, dans la station, j'ai une idée comme ça, on fait le camion de Duel. Donc c'est le premier film de Spielberg. Et on fait des photos références, on voit qu'il y a 2 camions pour le tournage, ils sont pas pareils. Donc on s'est dit, on va en choisir un, c'est pas grave. Il l'a tout modélisé, on a mis de la rouille le plus vite possible, on l'a foutu dans la station. Et le vendredi, il y a Spielberg qui s'assoit avec le directeur créatif, Habib Zargarpour, le directeur artistique, et je te montrerai la petite BD. Donc il est comme ça, on fait Randy Smith, il bouge le pad, il fait voilà, là on a fini la station, le motel est presque fini en texture, etc. Et à chaque fois qu'il tourne le pad, on voit le camion. Et Spielberg, il bloque comme ça dessus. Et je vois qu'il se gratte la tête, il se dit c'est marrant parce que ce truc tout rouillé dans l'environnement tout gris, c'est bizarre. Donc il dit mais c'est pas le camion de duel ça? Et donc en fait ils y vont, ils lui montrent tout le camion, ils font des photos autour, ils rigolent et... Voilà, c'était un petit clin d'œil, c'était un petit message pour Spielberg à qui j'ai pas pu serrer la main quand j'y étais, il n'était pas là ce jour-là. Mais voilà, c'est un peu comme un rêve d'enfant en fait. C'est rigolo. Donc voilà, on repense à tous les films qu'on a vus de lui et puis on se dit tiens, on travaille pour lui, donc c'est cool quoi. Voilà, la petite blague Spielberg.
Meanwhile, we were thinking of what we were going to do, after that. And bad luck. Doug wants to call me, and he's in France. And himself was he traveled to France to spend 1 week with the team working on that game, LMNO. And he calls me and he says like, "Man, I don't know where this comes from. I just got called. The game is canceled."
That moment that LMNO got canceled, we were at a restaurant at the time called Bartlett's, which is way overpriced but has pretty good burgers and sandwich in particular that Raph really likes. We were celebrating the signing of what ended up being a pretty minor deal for us, and Arkane was currently contracting on like a bunch of different things at once. And I remember Raph like, taking the call at the table, and his whole demeanor changed. He couldn't hear anyone at the table, and he was like, "Hello, oh yeah, hey, what? Really? And so it was like he walked away from the table at that point, and I was just like, oh fuck. And so it led to, it's terrible. And of course we rolled with the punches, everything worked out. But it led to a great practical joke, which like 2 years later, we had signed the deal with Bethesda. We were like, fuck yes, this is amazing. And one day we're sitting there and Raph fakes a call from Todd Vaughn. He's like, "Hello, Todd, really? And he does the same exact thing. And I remember my stomach just being like, dropping. I was like, and he got off the phone and started laughing, and I was like, "You motherfucker!" It's just like this terrible moment. We used to prank each other off and on in some terrible way like that probably would have driven half the people insane, but it was funny in retrospect,
You're a monster, Raph. While public information on The Crossing is rare, and on LMNO even rarer, the next project Arkane worked on is so shrouded in secrecy that most fans of the franchise it was set in have never even heard of it, much to the disappointment of the team in Lyon. It's never been seen before, but its chapter in the evolution of Arkane is crucial. It never had a commercial title, but inside Arkane, they refer to it by a single word: Ravenholm. In a 2015 Game Informer interview, Warren Spector spoke of a Half-Life 2 episode he and his team at Junction Point had been working on. He said it contained a magnet gun that was completely different from anything Valve had done and was really freeform in its use. Junction Point would never finish this game, but the prototype they created would eventually find its way to Arkane once Valve hired them to create their own episode. Once again, Warren Spector was passing the baton to his immersive sim protégés.
Je sais plus qui on jouait réellement, mais je me rappelle, le truc que j'avais vraiment apprécié, c'est qu'ils avaient fait un pistolet magnet en fait, qui permettait d'attirer. Donc c'était un gravity gun mais déporté en fait. Donc il y avait, ça jetait des sphères comme ça magnétisait des combines, etc. Donc voilà, donc on avait une build, ok. Raph il review ça, on regarde. Et ensuite, on est venu avec l'équipe design, il y avait un peu de Victor, Raph, je crois qu'il y avait Anthony Iso à l'époque qui écrivait pour nous, c'est un level designer à Arkane, senior, il est là depuis Dark Messiah, il travaille à Austin. Et il a commencé à écrire un petit peu du scénario autour de Grégory, comment on pourrait implémenter Grégory si on jouait à Ravenholm. Tout de suite un contexte. Parce que juste du design et des proto-maps, ça suffit pas. En tant qu'artiste, on peut pas. Le scénariste, c'est pareil. Donc en fait, dans le scénario, donc, on rencontre Grégory qui s'est reclus, qui s'est planqué dans un asile. et qui est aussi un centre d'expérimentation et qui est aussi... Enfin, il y a plusieurs fonctionnalités dans le bâtiment. C'est un hôpital pour enfants, c'est pour ça qu'il y a plein de jouets d'enfants, c'est un peu creepy, quoi, un peu flippant. Donc on le rencontre. Dans la bulle qu'on a, on n'a pas le first person qui est bon, mais en fait on joue le lieutenant Shepard de Opposing Force. Donc c'est assez rigolo parce que quand il y a eu quelques fuites en fait sur ce projet, et il y a un peu tout qui se dit, c'est Half-Life 3, c'est épisode 12, c'est assez rigolo. Et nous on le considérait pas comme un épisode, on avait les épisodes 1, 2, etc. On les avait dans nos builds en fait, parce qu'on travaille avec Valve, donc on reçoit leur code. Mais en fait, c'était un spin-off, quoi. On travaillait ça comme un standalone spin-off. Donc voilà. Donc est-ce qu'après Valve le considérait comme un épisode? Peut-être, mais ça s'est pas fait, donc on ne saura jamais en fait.
We often talk to teams about projects that never saw the light of day, fruits of their labor they never got to share, but I've never talked to a team that was so excited to share an untold story. I can only imagine what it must feel like to work on such an exciting project, to pour so much of your creative effort into it, only to never be able to talk about it. Ravenholm left a massive impression on Arkane. It's a critical part of their story, but one that could be so easily lost to time. Perhaps this is why an early alpha build of the game sits on a computer in Arkane. It's an early version with plenty of unfinished levels, placeholder assets, and rough edges, but with that unmistakable Half-Life feel, thanks to the power of Valve's Source engine. They tell me a few weeks after starting, new employees often get a tap on the shoulder and are walked over for an opportunity to play it.
So, with the blessing of both Arkane and Valve, before we dive into the design philosophy of Arkane's Ravenholm, I wanted to make sure we gave you that same opportunity, that all too rare feeling of booting up a brand new Half-Life.
So much violence here now. I regret you have become part of it, and yet I confess I am gladdened by your company. Too much solitude is not good for a man who, like myself, wishes only to serve. But I have been good for nothing of late. My soul is filled with evil, and like this town, it must be purged. Now I cannot claim great wisdom, yet through much trial and error, I have found a way to immunize myself against the demon's neurotoxins. Homeopathic principles, you understand. We have time for a quick bite, supping on nourishment quite plentiful in Ravenholm. Would that it were otherwise. If one is sufficiently famished, the white meat is tolerable. I will make no comparisons to poultry. Peculiar tendons. I'm quite immune to their bite. Days I hardly even notice them. Now as for the beacon, I will try to provide some illumination. I have prayed for assistance with this particular task, and tonight my prayers were answered. But this has ceased being about them. Truth be told, brother, I fear for myself, and now for you as well. The beacon exists to send out a signal. It will be a guiding light to all who have eyes to see. No time! We are safe here no longer. They have surrounded us like water. They have seized away our day.
Nous, tout ce qu'on sait, c'est qu'on a fait à peu près 9-10 missions. Avec, il nous manque quelques scènes entre certaines maps avec du véhicule, mais globalement, voilà, c'est un... Tu dois aider Grégory à résoudre des puzzles, remettre l'électricité dans l'aile ouest, l'aile est, etc. Et tout est dans cet environnement, jusqu'à quitter pouvoir t'échapper de l'asylum et retourner à Ravenholm de Half-Life 2. Donc comme ça, on fait une sorte de boucle. Et on trouvait intéressant de changer le personnage et de Shepard. Dans Opposing Force, j'avais adoré les first person, les idle animation qui étaient fantastiques. Ils avaient fait un boulot de fou, en fait. J'ai vu, c'est toi qui as fait le reportage, ça m'a expliqué comment ils avaient signé le contrat, traversé la rue pour aller signer le contrat, revenir et dire c'est bon à Valve, on est bon, on fait Opposing Force. Valve qui leur laisse carte blanche. Donc nous, c'était un peu ça. On faisait des reviews, on leur envoyait des builds, ils testaient. Artistiquement, des fois on galérait parce qu'ils étaient en train de changer le code, on avait des textures qui marchaient plus, ils nous expliquaient comment optimiser le système de brush des niveaux. Comment mieux implémenter les objets sur les murs, parce que c'est pas le même système de lighting entre un objet et les brushes. Bref, c'était cool. Et puis en même temps, on avait nos animateurs qui bossaient des animations de zombies, qui utilisent des armes, qui font du super design, quoi. Pendant que nous, on fait du super visuel. Donc c'était la confiance totale. Chacun était dans son coin. On voyait des prototypes qui tuaient, nous on leur montrait des style guides visuels, ils étaient là, oh, ça va être génial, tout le monde va adorer. Et puis quand le projet a été arrêté, on a fait non, c'est pas possible, on peut pas s'arrêter là. Donc pendant 2 semaines, on a tout assemblé. Tous les prototypes de design, les singes, avec la lumière, les torches, on a tout mis, on a mis dans les niveaux. Donc c'est pour ça qu'il y a des petits bouts de niveaux qui sont pas tout à fait faits, d'autres qui sont plus poussés. Mais le statut, c'est à peu près alpha. Donc ouais, on s'est vraiment éclaté. Donc qu'est-ce qu'on a fait? On a des armes qu'on avait designées qui n'existent plus, mais on joue beaucoup avec l'électricité du coup, puisque justement on produit avec les éoliennes. Et on a un flingue qui est un nail gun et qui permet de tirer des balls en fait dans l'environnement. Et on a plein de prises qui sont cassées, inactives, mais dans lesquelles il y a l'électricité. Du coup, on peut planter des balls et faire des cordons électriques. Quand on a des vagues de zombies qui arrivent, ils passent dans ces cordons électriques et partent en fumée. D'ailleurs, c'est Raphaël qui a timé toute l'animation des zombies pour qu'ils tombent comme des feuilles et qu'ils disparaissent. C'est assez impressionnant pour l'époque, 2007-2008. C'était vraiment cool. Ensuite, on a une autre arme qu'on peut charger, j'ai oublié le nom. Mais en gros, c'est un plasma gun. En fait, quand on est près d'une source d'électricité, elle va se charger. Et on peut balancer des grosses boules d'énergie sur les ennemis. Mais aussi on peut réactiver des objets. Donc on a plein de pièges avec des hélices placées par Grégory sur le chemin pour que lui il puisse progresser tout seul. Il a mis tout ça en place. Donc c'est ça qui est fou. Ce qui est dingue, c'est qu'on voit sa folie à lui en fait sur comment piéger les zombies qui n'arrêtent pas d'arriver. Et il nous donne tous ces outils à nous qu'on chope progressivement. Donc voilà, on peut jouer dans le noir avec des singes qui ont peur de la lumière, donc c'est super impressionnant parce que quand il y en a un là et qu'on doit faire use sur une wheel en même temps, c'est impossible. Donc on fait vite la wheel, vite la lampe, c'est assez stressant, c'est vraiment cool. C'est fluide. Voilà, et le père Grégory, donc en gros, globalement, je vais pas spoiler la fin parce que peut-être qu'un jour ils montreront la fin. Mais le père Grégory fait des expérimentations sur il est tout seul dans cet asile un peu, et il prend des headcrabs et il extracte du jus de headcrab et il se fait des injections. Il teste sur des animaux pour voir ce que ça peut faire, s'il peut prendre de la force, mais en fait, il prend ça comme une drogue, mais il est en train de muter progressivement. Donc dans la build, on le voit pas, mais donc il se fait l'injection et progressivement dans le jeu, il va mettre sa capuche parce qu'il commence à se transformer. Et jusqu'à un moment donné où tout va éclater et il va être tout mutant, quoi. Mais c'est vraiment cool parce que c'est progressif, il y a des bons beats dans le jeu, c'est intéressant. Il n'y a pas beaucoup de personnages, en plus c'est nous deux. Et le reste, des zombies, le acide zombie qui crache de l'acide un petit peu, ça c'est assez intéressant, il est plus lent, plus costaud. Les hordes de zombies, ça c'était vraiment très cool à faire. Left 4 Dead n'était pas là encore, donc pour nous le jeu de zombies c'était encore les zombies lents, mais dans les films ça commence à s'accélérer quoi. Donc 28 jours plus tard c'était nos références de l'époque, ça a 13 ans à peu près. 13-14 ans, voilà. Et c'est toujours cool. Et on voulait vraiment faire le projet, enfin tout monter en même temps. Donc pendant que les level designers s'éclataient avec l'électricité, à tester plein d'armes différentes, le leaf blower, il n'est pas dans la bulle finale. Mais tu pouvais sauter, faire des double jumps comme dans Quake, mais avec un leaf blower, donc c'était rigolo, un souffleur de feuilles pour les Français. Et voilà, on a testé plein d'armes, de fonctionnalités, et puis au bout d'un moment, on a fait des choix, on les a placés dans les maps comme il faut. J'ai proposé que Grégory soit isolé du reste du monde, il soit enfermé. Si on veut faire un survival, c'est mieux d'être un peu bloqué. Et les lignes électriques, on les voit dans le décor au début, elles sont couchées, ça a cassé, donc il a plus d'électricité et il récolte. Il va dans toutes les voitures qu'on voit dans Half-Life, je trouvais ça rigolo, il y a tout le temps des carcasses de voitures, donc il pique les batteries, il les accumule et il stocke de l'énergie des éoliennes, qui était un premier design de Victor pour le Half-Life 2, qui n'a pas été retenu. Donc on a réutilisé ça et il est autonome, et l'électricité elle est très instable. Donc c'est une expérience plus linéaire que ce qu'on fait dans nos jeux actuellement, mais tout est cohérent. Mais voilà, il y a un état d'esprit, on ne veut pas perdre le joueur, et ça fait partie de immersive sim, quoi. L'immersion, c'est quand si tu perds le joueur, tu perds un peu l'immersion. Évidemment, tu te dis que c'est du cartoon, western, que c'est faux, que c'est fake. Et nous, on s'accorde vraiment à essayer de rendre ça crédible, en fait. Donc quand on a failli couler, Raph, il fallait qu'il trouve des projets. Donc il vient avec une mauvaise nouvelle et nous dit on arrête Ravenholm. Et nous on dit non, c'est pas possible. Donc on assemble tout le jeu en une semaine ou deux. Et on dit mais tiens, regarde. Alors il renvoie à Valve. Mais regardez, c'est bien, mais ils avaient pris leur décision, donc c'était comme ça. Paf, tout. On a fait une build en se disant allez, ils vont continuer, mais ils avaient pris leur décision que je respecte.
Do you have any insight from your side why you think they decided not to go ahead with it, especially considering how far along it was?
Yeah, I think that the team in France has never really accepted the end of Ravenholm, and I think they read too much into it. Frankly, I just think it was business. It was, and that's what I said to all of them, because they kept on asking me like, Raph, there's got to be something more. And I think Valve was trying to figure out a way to make episodic content that was going to make financial sense for them. And it was very hard for them to develop them even internally, because the costs are, they have big teams. And so like the math, the economics of such a episode had to make sense. And we were cheap compared to them. We had potential, and they tried with us, they tried with some other teams as well. And the plan was, if we throw that amount of money into an episode and it works and it's good enough, because they're also looking for like top quality, of course, it's Valve, then it's a good deal. So they try things, and then we were late. The thing you've seen was really cool. To finish it, to bring it to completion, we still probably have to spend another year. And maybe at least the same amount of money or less, a little bit less. But then you look at how much it is now that it costs, and when it ships, and it doesn't make so much sense anymore. I think the reason why the French team responded so bad to it was that they were extremely emotionally invested. We thought we were friends. We thought you liked us, kind of thing.
Donc du coup, le temps est passé. J'ai appris à être moins triste et me dire ça m'a aidé pour ça, j'ai level up, l'équipe on a appris plein de choses, et tout ce qu'on a fait dans Ravenholm on ressent encore dans Dishonored 2, dans Deathloop, ça continue.
During these three projects, Arkane was frequently doing work for hire gigs on other games, some of which they've been publicly credited on and others not. Raphael's American base helping him to secure these collaborations and work for hire gigs with studios in the US, while the team in France had lower development costs thanks to the economic conditions of that time.
For sure, after Dark Messiah, things didn't go exactly as we wanted. We had to switch progressively to more work for hire, working as contractors for publishers.
Bioshock 2, c'était super parce que c'est le même esprit en fait. La petite anecdote, c'est que j'avais pas joué à Bioshock 1. parce que j'avais vu quelqu'un Arkane jouer et je trouvais que l'environnement était tout bizarre. Quand on arrive dans Rapture, les valises sont énormes et je disais mais c'est pas des vraies valises, c'est mal fait ce décor. Donc j'avais pas voulu jouer. Et quand on m'a dit mais si tu vas aller bosser sur Bioshock 2, donc là je me suis dépêché, j'ai joué et tout, j'étais bon elles sont grosses les valises mais c'est pas grave, je vais continuer de jouer en tant que perfectionniste des visuels. Et j'arrive là-bas, et le premier truc que je leur dis, parce qu'on retourne à la Rapture, et je vois la train station de Rapture, et je dis s'il vous plaît, on peut réduire les valises un petit peu, donc on a réduit les valises, et là j'étais content, et on a fait tous les niveaux, on a fait 6 niveaux, toutes les animations de la Big Sister, les Little Sister, le level design, et donc c'était level design et level architecture, et ouais c'était super, donc on voyageait à nos bateaux, on revenait, 1 mois, on repartait, 2 mois. Et voilà, et ça s'est fait comme ça. Eux, après, ils ont terminé le jeu, ils l'ont packé, ça a shippé.
So we had a very good period of collaborations between, I would say, 2006 and 2009. But in 2008-9, there was this financial crisis that impacted all the big publishers, especially the ones having being public, you know, and having stock issues. And it was the case for the project LMNO, for instance, with EA, and they had to cancel the project for financial reasons, which is okay, but it was very abrupt for us. And we had suddenly like 30 or 40 developers without any project. And we were independent, so we were super fragile. So we could say, maybe we can pay you for 3 months or 6 months, but after that, we don't know. So it was super urgent to find a new project. And at that point, I think it was Ralph who made an interview to the press saying, yeah, we have met a lot of good collaborations, but right now we're an available team. So, you know, it was kind of call for help. And at some point, Bethesda, ZeniMax, and they came to us and they say, hey, we think you're good at that, and we have some ideas like a concept maybe you could work on as a contractor.
The game Bethesda pitched to Arkane was a Thief-style experience set in medieval Japan, a game where you played as a super ninja running in Unreal with the title Dishonored. But they wouldn't be working under contract very long. Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax were in an expansion phase, having just acquired id Software, and raised the idea of acquiring Arkane. After years of struggling to fund projects and to make the games they wanted, it sounds like in the end, it wasn't that difficult a decision.
Companies spend an inordinate amount of time with like a pack of 5 lawyers and business oxygen, not only trying to put you in a vice so you can't make a good deal that's mutually beneficial, but also nickel and diming you down. So many times it makes a bad game because you get down the stretch, you don't have enough money to finish the game and everybody's unhappy. And that's why I think when Raph and I started working with Todd Vaughn, Bethesda was orders of magnitude more direct and a smaller group of people, less layers in the company, more clear about what the goal was. Regardless of what you might think from outside, it is a group of people dedicated to making the coolest experiences for players. It's not publicly traded, it's held by a smaller group of people. And when you need to talk to somebody, you talk to like a handful of people. It's not clear until you've worked with a bunch of publishers and you've sat in a bunch of meetings and you've done a bunch of biz dev and you've pitched games and you've pitched crazy, cool, creative ideas that excite you in genres or subgenres that haven't always been super profitable. And you're pitching to MBAs, accountants, lawyers, marketing people. Until you've done that, you cannot possibly appreciate what it's like when you actually sit down across the table and connect with some people. And then you realize like, okay, this is where I'm going to make good stuff.
I will never regret integrating the group. There were a lot of people there that are, I consider my friends, very smart people. Got a lot of respect for them. And they allowed us to do things we could not have done with any other publisher, like Harvey was saying. Frankly, our games are weird. They are hard to sell. They're hard to understand. And having a group that had the money and the nerves to believe in us and wait to see the thing happen and then sell it well, then marketed it pretty well, yeah, was just something that is worth everything.
This acquisition was important to Arkane's leadership for two reasons. One, Bethesda was willing to fund the team longer than any third-party publisher had been up to that point, to give the team the time to create the type of complex simulations they'd always wanted to. And perhaps more importantly, it allowed people like Raph to focus on designing games again. So much of the team's time and energy had been spent in business meetings, pitching ideas, knocking together prototypes. Dishonored would be the very first game that the entire team could focus on creatively. The name stayed, but the Japanese setting didn't. They chose an inspiration a little closer to home, London, which would eventually morph into a world of their very own. This international team worked almost around the clock, Austin waking up just as the French team were coming back from lunch, a 24-hour webcam connecting the two studios, allowing team members across the globe to walk up and ask questions whenever they needed to. All the pieces were now in place. Experience in world design and movement from their work on The Crossing, more knowledgeable at non-lethal combat from their experience developing LMNO, and eager to prove themselves after the loss of Ravenholm, Arkane Studios began Dishonored.
There was Harvey and Raph were here, Quinn was here, Anthony was here, and an engineer that was with us on Dishonored named Kane was here, and I was employee number 6. I don't actually know the entire team size. I think in Austin we were 22 or 23 people.
And then Leon, probably something similar.
Leon was, I believe Leon was probably, just guessing, in their 40s to 50s. Overall, a relatively small team for the size of the game we made.
Bah, sur Dishonored 1, des challenges, c'est alors au début on part du principe que on est une ville qui est infestée par la peste, donc pas trop de vie dans les niveaux, pas de foule à gérer, de NPC de partout, jusqu'au moment où il y a quelqu'un qui lui dit tiens, on va faire des rats swarm. Et là, rat swarm, donc avec 3 rats, ça sera pas très sympathique. Donc il faut essayer de trouver une techno où on va pouvoir avoir beaucoup de rats en même temps pour que ça soit sympa. Voilà, et c'est le genre de feature en fait où chaque fois les designers arrivent avec une idée qu'on veut rajouter pour un truc précis mais qui nous demande de développer quelque chose de complet, quoi. Donc voilà. Donc en général on travaille en incrémental, donc au début on a un petit concept, par exemple pour posséder, l'idée c'est de posséder un NPC, donc au départ c'est pas très compliqué, hein, un NPC on se dit bon bah, voilà ça va être un personnage qui va marcher, donc on aura le player qui sera remplacé par un autre body et ça sera si simple que ça. Et typiquement à Arkane, on s'arrête pas là. Et donc après il y a un designer qui dit et pourquoi pas les rats, et du coup après bah, il faut pouvoir passer sous les tables, passer par les trous, donc il faut préparer de la technologie pour avoir un pathfind qui marche pour les players, mais aussi pour les players quand ils sont rats. Et puis après, il y a toujours un gars pour dire, bah, et pourquoi pas des poissons, des choses comme ça. Mais...
So yeah, when you add any kind of systemic feature to the game, it can spill over into other areas. And there's super simple examples, like we wanted to make a non-lethal game where you could sleep dart people and like put them up on a bed or in the rafters, and then they would wake up later theoretically and you haven't killed anyone. But we also had these plague rats that would sometimes find the bodies and consume them because they were sleeping, and that wasn't initially an intention, you know. And so then we had to try to figure out how to turn that off to not invalidate the player's non-lethal path, you know, or does the player bear culpability for that? There was a moment like pretty far into development when I realized I was sitting there and I thought about it for a while, and I looked up at Raph and I was like, you know, because of the heavy stealth component here, you never actually have to kill a guard, which means that we really have about 10, I think it was 9 or 10 assassination targets. And if we could find a way to eliminate each of those without killing them, then we could literally make this whole alternate system where this game can be played non-lethally. And Raph was like, wow, that would be cool, but it would be really, really hard given all the scripting involved, and how do you not assassinate an assassination target? And I was like, give me like half a day and then we'll have a meeting. And so I sat down and it was very simple. I just wrote down the 9 or 10 names of the assassination targets. And I just wrote out to the side of it, like, you know, one of them taken away to prison, you know, another one stripped of his title and position. After half a day of us thinking about it and kicking it around, we had a list of at least half of them were good. And the other half were kind of wobbly. And immediately somebody looked down, I don't remember who it was, Rich Wilson or Ricardo Bear or one of them, but they looked down and said, in the religious case, what if there was a brand that the religious guys had that if you were marked with it, you were an untouchable. No one was allowed to speak to you or shelter you or give you food or employ you or whatever, the Heretics brand, we eventually called it. And it was like, that is so much better than the idea that I jotted down. Let's immediately embrace that one. And just over time, for Dishonored 1 and Dishonored 2, we came up with all of these somewhat perverse alternate resolutions, like the two guys who would indenture people and put them to work in their mines, the two aristocrats. You can have them like taken away, their heads are shaved, their tongues are cut out, and they're put to work in their own mines. And no one believes that they're the Pendleton brothers. You know, that was like one of them. And that one is one that resonated with people. I still hear people talking about it. Some of them were pretty trivial to pull off as alternate outcomes. Some of them were a lot harder, requiring a little scene, like, High Overseer Campbell in a chair with a Heretics brand marking his face, an alternate skin with the decal on his face. And so that's a good example of like a feature that I don't think would happen at most games.
It's crazy, and it's something that's like one of the defining features of Dishonored.
Yeah, right. It ended up being that way, yeah.
When we find out that something is fun, then we're like, well, let's do that. Blink was a good example of that in Dishonored, which started out as like having a cost and a cooldown and all of these kinds of things.
And it was optional.
And I remember I threw my hands up in the air and said, we can't do this. We can't have Blink be limited like this. Player has to be blinking everywhere.
Bend time was a beast of a feature to try to pull off. It was really complicated, and it's probably what we shipped is actually probably more complicated than people realize. It's very complex in that we had to split time into what the world was experiencing and what the player was experiencing. And so when you activate that power, the world slows down, the player might slow down a little bit, and then as you interact with something, it has to be pulled, out of that time that the world is experiencing up to what Corvo is experiencing. And then when you stop interacting with it, it falls back into that other time space. And as part of that, if it bumps something along the way, it'll pull it out, and then they'll fall back in together. And so that lets you do things like, if you throw a crate in Bend time, if you throw it into the air, it'll just stop. If you throw it, but it happens to maybe hit another crate, they'll both tumble a little bit before they stop. And that's what lets you do things like fire the crossbow, see that crossbow bolt hanging in the air, and then walk up and just give it a little bump, and it'll go flying, like 20 more feet. And it was really hard to get that working throughout everything. Pretty much all of the game systems had to know about Bend time. So it was all the work we did even after we wrote that power still had to tie into it. There was, we had a problem one time we discovered pretty early on where you could throw something up in the air and climb up on it while it was still floating in the air, and then pick it up from underneath your feet, throw it again, climb up on it again, and you could go everywhere. Sometimes the little things that happen as part of our explorations and just, playing the game and experiencing it for ourselves, we run across stuff where it's unexpected, but you got to ask yourself, what's it do for the player experience? Does it make things better? Does it enhance it in any way? And oftentimes we run across stuff like that does, and then the discussion pivots. And now it's not about how do we fix that, it's about what do we need to do to make that a real thing. Somebody actually went back to original Dishonored, and in the opening scene where you're supposed to go up and meet the Empress and Dad shows up and murders her, they use some exploits to climb way up on top of some of the collision volumes that were in the map before anything had happened, managed to walk their way around and get over to the building that Dowd and the assassins appear on, got over to where they show up. Dowd actually appeared, and the player fought and killed Dowd before he had a chance to kill the Empress, and the game just gracefully paused for a second and then faded to black.
You're kidding.
Yeah. It's like, game over, you win.
Wow.
Yeah, total surprise.
Like, no need for the second game, any of the DLCs. Yep. Job done.
Story's over.
Wow.
Yeah,
that was ever after.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
All right. Do you know why it faded to black? Was it just?
No idea.
That's amazing.
At that point, we were so busy with Prey and stuff that we had going on, we didn't really go back and try to figure out why the scripting did that, but it was impressive that it actually handled it.
By the time Dishonored was released, Arkane had been around for 12 years, but nothing they'd made before had anywhere near this impact. And as fruitful as the cross-continental collaboration had been, it had been exhausting for both teams. And both Harvey and Rav were pointing in different creative directions. So they decided to divide the teams once again and focus on 2 different projects. Harvey would move to Lyon and work on a sequel to Dishonored, while Raph would lead the team in Austin in making a spiritual successor to both System Shock and their very first game. But instead of putting the dungeon underground, they did, well, the opposite.
I think like the nugget of the idea was like doing something in a more like Arx Fatalis. Like instead of a level-based, mission-based game, like it's a contained, big structure, like a dungeon or a spaceship or one big ass building or a city, something just like one space that was like not completely linear in the way Dishonored is, right? In terms of like the mission sequence. Eventually we hit on the let's do the science fiction version of this on a space station. Raph started working on a pitch where one of the chief conceits that he wanted to do was the whole mind games thing, like what you see, you can't trust exactly what you see. And so he had a very detailed initial pitch of that, the first 10 minutes of Prey.
I remember being on a plane with Raph and he had sketched out some of the whole opening section when Morgan goes to his first day at work. Originally, the tests were supposed to be kind of a parkour test. They were a little more physical oriented, and that sort of shifted over time. And then the mimic crashes through and you wake up and it's the same day again. And that was from the very beginning, never changed.
One of the constraints or one of the values that we bit off was the player's powers. Because of our fiction, they come from the aliens. Anything we come up with for an alien, there has to be a version of it that the player could possibly utilize as well. So that, it was cool, but it was a big pain in the ass too, because you could just brainstorm oh, wouldn't this be a cool power? But then we're like, yeah, but then the player gets a version of that, so what does that look like,
The mimic then.
Yeah, so that's what drove that, is initially the mimic was actually the bipedal human phantom. I think Raph pitched an idea around a creature that could disguise itself or whatever. And then in talking, we were like, well, let's make it not bespoke or scripted. Let's make it so that it's actually systemic. We have a bunch of physics objects in the game. Why not just let the creature decide what it wants to mimic and put some rules around, how often and what its range is and stuff like that. But then we were like, guys, this means the player can do that too. The player can turn into a cup and roll around on the ground, and we were like, ah! And so that was a major freak out, especially on the tech side. They were like, the player's gonna turn into a pen and fall through the floor, and because all that's super legit concerns.
Mimic required us to establish a visual language with the art team. So it's okay, if there's anything in the world that is this large or smaller or whatever, it has to be mimicable. If there's anything smaller than that, it has to go or become static somehow, or there were pencils for a while there, but it's well, if the player mimics a pencil, then they're gonna fall through the world because it's very skinny, or clipboards, things like that. I was clipboard police for a while. And so we had to weed out those things and make sure there was if the player's in a tight spot and needs to mimic something to escape, they need to be able to see at a glance, okay, I can mimic that, that, and that.
Weapon degradation was a huge fight with the lead systems designer because he really, really wanted it. And everyone on the team was like, no, this game is hard. I don't want you to have my weapons fall apart on me too. So we shelved that and we brought that back with Mooncrash when we added in the more survival tactics. And it worked there. I hated playing it with it when it was in Prey, but I loved it in Mooncrash. So yeah, that was something we brought back there.
Alright, many of you are probably looking for more information on Prey, Dishonored, and the various DLC packs, but don't worry, we have you covered. We have full documentaries coming on those games during the summer, so make sure you're subscribed to our channel to get notified once they go live.
While the team in Austin worked on their space dungeon, the folks in France were tackling a different sort of challenge, trying to reinvent their breakthrough hit.
We wanted to refine all the stuff that we had done in Dishonored 1. We wanted a chance to make it bigger and richer, deeper. We wanted to see some other place besides Dunwall, but then come back to Dunwall. And so we did all of that, even though it was a Herculean effort.
Karnaka, la volonté, c'était de faire un gros contraste avec Dunwall. Qu'est-ce qu'on voulait garder de Dishonored? Donc il y a la magie, on la garde, la décadence, on la gardait. Parce que il n'y a plus la même oppression, il y a des gardes, mais c'est plus des gens corrompus, parce qu'on va vers le sud. C'est plus de la corruption que des gardes officiels qui travaillent pour un dictateur. Là, ça donne la même chose, mais c'est pas la même formule. Il fait chaud, on voit la mort, les morts en plein soleil. C'est plus flippant que les morts dans la rue noire.
And the other thing was, a lot of our fans, a lot of the people who Dishonored really touched, the people who did the art, the fan fiction, played 100 hours. You could say that it's a group that is not served as well by many traditional games. And so they're very passionate. And a lot of them are women. And so at the time, it was not as common to have like a female protagonist. And so when we were thinking about the game and we're like, well, what could we do? Is it the next day for Corvo or whatever? I just thought, what if we just advance it 15 years and it was all about Emily? And in the end, you were able to play Corvo 2. That was a thing we sort of squeezed in, you know, because it was the same levels and most of the same work, except the VO work and branching at the beginning to let you play one or the other, and the different set of powers. It ended up being more work than we expected, but those people responded to Emily in an interesting way. That was gratifying. That was a great moment for us.
Dishonored 2 and Prey came out in quick succession, the former in 2016 and the latter just 1 year later. By that time, Harvey was ready to move back to Texas, and Raph was ready to move on. In 2018, he left the studio he founded to create a new one, Wolfeye, where he leads a team making an immersive sim on a smaller scale. He still talks to the team often. Himself and Harvey used to meet for coffee in their favourite spot every few weeks. These days it's over video chat, sometimes with an Irish guy eavesdropping. Raph told me that his main motivation for leaving was change. There were aspects of corporate culture and AAA development that he had grown weary of, and he longed for a fresh creative start.
It seems kind of fitting, really. After 18 years, Arkane was all grown up, and it was time for the immersive sim mentor to pass the baton down to the next generation.
Even when we were part of Bethesda, the stress was still there. It was a different type of stress. It was not the stress of worrying that we're going to go under anymore, or what game we'll be making next week. But it's still extremely, there's so much at stake that you have everybody on you waiting for you to do this thing. It had been 18 years that I had been with the company. At this point, I had to make a choice. Either I was going for another game after that, so it means another 4-year cycle probably between the moment that you start having the idea to the moment the game ships, and that race for more technology, more content, bigger, more shaders, more looks, etc., often goes at odds with that agility that we need to come up with, trying quick, cool little ideas. There was a little bit of my second or third midlife crisis where Arkane was defining me, and I wasn't sure what I was without Arkane, and I don't regret it. I mean, I miss the guys, but I don't regret it. It was part of my story and an expression of what I wanted to be, my culture. I started this thing, and now it's on its own legs and it's doing its own thing.
When Raph, I think his words were something like, the studio is now 18. It's the age of adulthood. You guys should make your path now. Both you and Austin, you're ready to go. The very first feeling was not, thinking about career. Honestly, the feeling was it's a huge responsibility to take those to take this legacy and yes, do it justice, but also move it forward.
I don't know, being new to Arkane, there's a lot about this studio and the work that they do that is surprising to me, in that I'm surprised it exists. I'm surprised it can exist in this age of relative risk aversion and big blockbuster everything and easy marketable everything. I feel like I see the same 5 games come out every year, which isn't a problem. They're all really cool. And there's a whole bunch of creative stuff happening especially in smaller AAA and in indie. But this is a pretty big studio by my standards. It's 150 plus people, and we're making weird stuff in a big publisher. It's pretty cool. I didn't think it was possible. I thought, you'd have to choose. If you wanted to make weird, innovative stuff, you'd have to go really small scale. And if you're going to make a big game on a big label, then you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of that innovation. Arkane doesn't seem to accept that. There's too much weird here, and that's really fun. It's definitely challenging. It's definitely the hard way to make it. But I think the result is a lot less predictable.
20 years on, the story of Arkane is still being told, but our one, at least, has reached its conclusion. At the start of all this, I asked Raph what his dreams for the studio were, so it seems only appropriate to ask him one more question, to cast his eyes backwards and let us know what this all meant to him, the people he worked with for all those years, and the fans that cheered them all along.
Yeah, for all the Arkanites that decided to join us and stay with us and are still there now, I'm very honored and very touched that people believed in me back then, and then in us as we were growing, and then in Harvey now, etc. It's great that this Arkane became some sort of we started with nothing. It was just like this bunch of hopeful developers, and then it became the beacon of immersive sims where all these developers wanted to work for and do some sacrifice, because it's hard. I mean, making games is hard, making those games is hard. So thank you so much, and I wish you the best, and I'm looking forward to playing the next game. And for the fans, it's amazing that we became something that is part of the pop culture. As I think we first realized this when we were making Dishonored, and you start seeing some fan art and some stuff that people make content with your content. So that's the fans. So thank you very much, and I'm sure, like me, they're waiting to see what Arkane is going to be doing next.